Hi everyone, welcome. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to come in this afternoon and listen to me speak about the art of intuitive photography and to celebrate the launch of my book. It's a very exciting time. So I want to start off this presentation with a question. Have you ever found yourself frustrated over the images not being creative enough or just plain flat, boring, and dull? Can I see any, raise your hands if you've experienced that? My gosh, okay. A lot of people. I used to be like that. I feel your frustration, I feel your pain. And I'll talk a little bit about, I'll tell you a story about how I transitioned from a frustrated photographer to an enlightened photographer. So this is me at about 2 years old. My parents are both European. And I don't think they had an idea of American fashion at that time. They liked to dress me up in like doll clothes. So my first kind of experience with photography was when I was about 7 years old. My father had bought a Minox spy camera. I'm not sure if any of you know those. So kind of, it's really cool looking. And he gave it to my older brother, who's 5 years older than I am. My brother had no interest in it whatsoever. Sitting on a shelf, and I like gadgets and stuff, so I picked it up and I started taking photos of him playing softball in Central Park. So I actually kind of loved the effect of my parents would take me to a place to develop the film. I'd get it back. It was exciting to see the photos. I went to the Rudolf Steiner School here in the city. It's a Waldorf school, which is also very much about supporting and nurturing the creative aspect in children. So I was a very creative child. I loved to paint, I loved to draw, and I loved to write. Now I'm much more of a visual storyteller than I am a written storyteller, even though I just have the book now, which is super exciting. But so I went to NYU. I was an English literature major specializing in fiction writing. And then my first job out of college, like David had mentioned, was working in IT in a bank. Completely not creative, completely not at all what I wanted to do, but when you're 21 and somebody offers you a paying job, you take it, right? You don't think, is this gonna make me happy for the rest of my life? The bank that I worked for, I was very fortunate. They transferred me over to Luxembourg. I moved to Europe. Now, in Europe, we have a lot of vacation. I had 7 weeks vacation, not including public holidays. I had a film camera in those days, and I traveled a lot. I know Europe better than I know America. And I would try to document all the amazing beauty, castles, doorknobs, landscapes, all that. And when I'd get my prints back about a week later, horrible, frustrated. It was really frustrating. The photos were flat, they were boring, they weren't what I wanted to showcase. While living in Luxembourg, I realized I really just didn't want to do IT anymore. It was kind of just not giving me any sort of passion. So I quit my job and I actually moved to Switzerland. I returned back to school. I did my master's in media and communications. My thinking was I wanted to get back more into a creative environment within the corporate world. So I did my MBA, lived in Switzerland for a few years after that, and then about 8 years ago I moved back to New York. Now, I was gone for quite a few years, so when I moved back to New York City, I realized there is no city like New York City. It's pretty amazing. Every neighborhood is different. Different colors, different energy, different smells even, depending on the time of season. So I said to myself, I'm going to immerse myself in photography classes here. I signed up for an adult education course. It met for about, I think it was 8 weeks, 3 hours after work. And I really didn't resonate with it. Number one, teacher was not very inspiring. I'm sure you all know if you don't have a teacher you connect with, you really don't get anything from the class. And teachers that you love, you just, you pick it up really quick. The issue with that particular course was it was, number one, very technical. I wanted to really kind of explore my creative side with photography. Because I had such a creative job in the past, I wanted my photography to be fun and spontaneous and joyful and creative. I didn't really want to have to think with every shot I took. The second thing that I really didn't like about that particular course is it was in a classroom, fluorescent lights, it was overheated, there was no engagement between the teacher and the students. I wasn't picking anything up. Now, on the rare occasion he would take us out in a group, he would set us all up in a single file line, tell us exactly how to set our camera settings, and then he'd say, photograph the building, the tree, whatever it was. We were all taking the same exact photo. We were all robots. There was no creativity, no individuality, and that really, really frustrated me. I didn't want to take the same photo as everyone else. So what was my solution? I started skipping classes. So I was going around the city with my camera around my neck. Now, at that point in my life, I was asking myself these pretty big questions. I think we get to a certain age and we start asking ourselves, what's my purpose in this life? How can I make a difference in the world? And I was asking the same type of questions with my photography. Specifically, what kind of photographer do I really want to be? And what kind of photos do I really want to capture? And it became very, very clear to me that I want to capture life as it's happening. The immediacy of it, the rawness of it. I want to touch, taste, smell, feel what's going on. And I found myself that if I was walking around with multiple cameras and lenses and reflector and flash and tripods, if I saw something happening, I would think, do I need to switch my lens? Do I need my tripod? Do I need the flash? And that moment was gone. So I started recognizing that if I just let all of that go, if I turned that off and started following what I was feeling from in here, all of a sudden my photos became a little bit more interesting. So I started kind of delving into that. I then went back to my teacher and I asked him, do you photograph with your heart or your head? And he looked at me as if I was crazy and he said, well, of course with your head. It has to be a technically perfect image. And that's where I said, this is so wrong, because what on this planet is perfect? Look at Mother Nature, she's not perfect. The things that make us beautiful as human beings are our imperfections. And it's also the same with our art form. If I go, for example, to Carnegie Hall and listen to a piano concerto, it could be performed technically perfect and be absolutely lovely, but I may fall asleep. But if they perform with passion and soul, I have a visceral experience. I tear up, I get goosebumps. I want the same when I look at a photograph. Or if I read a book. When I finished Harry Potter, I was crying. I burst out in tears. I connected with those characters. I wanted the story to continue. So I started recognizing that if I really kind of trust myself, became vulnerable, let go of the mental part of photography, my imagery was really changing. So I want to talk a little bit about that. I want to first cover intuition, what it really is, how it manifests in us, and how we can find out how to trust it. So we're all intuitive by nature. I have some students that said, oh, it skipped my generation, I don't have intuition. It's not genetic. It's part of the limbic system in the back of the brain. It's part of the fight or flight system. If you look at young children, up until the age of 6 or 7, they live a beautiful, creative, intuitive life. All they want to do is have fun. They want to just enjoy. They want to sing, they want to dance, they want to play. Now with little screens and computers, it's changing a little bit. But what happens then is by the time they get into first grade, there's this paradigm shift where they go from being authentic in who they really are to feeling that they need to change themselves to please others. So what happens if there's if a 7-year-old boy falls down and cries? He's told, be tough, be strong, be a man. Boys don't cry. He builds this wall up and it stays there through adulthood. It's the same thing with young girls. At an early age, there's teasing, there's all that. We build a wall in front of one another so that we can protect ourselves, because all we really want to do is be part of the popular group. And as we go older, we forget who we are inside. We all have that beautiful child still within us. We just have to kind of tap into that to see how it communicates with us now. So intuition really kind of communicates with us in 3 different ways. It's feeling, hearing, and seeing. We're brought up in a society not to trust our feelings. We're brought up in a society to trust this. Our intuition is constantly communicating with us, but we're just never really cognizant of it. For the feeling aspects, I'm sure you all have experienced a situation or a time where you're walking down the street and you sense someone dangerous is walking towards you. You have some sort of internal alarm system that says danger, right? It alerts you. You have some sort of physical reaction that tells you turn around or cross the street. The opposite can also happen. You may meet someone for the very first time and you genuinely like them. You have no explanation for it. You can talk to them for hours. You feel safe. You feel secure. Is that thought-based? No, it's intuition. It feels good, so you want to continue it. So again, our feelings our intuition's always communicating to us via our feelings. Now, we're all individual people. Our feelings are going to talk to us in different ways. For many of you, it may be butterflies in the stomach. It may be goosebumps. It might be that the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. So it's really kind of tuning in to find out how your intuition communicates with you. My intuition generally is right here. It's really in my gut. So when I was working in corporate and things were not really working out that well, I would feel it in my gut. Same with relationships. The relationship started going down, I would feel it in my gut. That was my internal alarm system. The other way intuition communicates with you is hearing. There may be times where you walk down the street and you may have a voice pop in your head and say, turn left, turn right, go straight, don't go down that street. It's generally a very loving, kind voice. It's not that critical voice. I'm sure we all are aware that there is that critical voice in our head that pops up, and it's normally very negative. It's the voice of our parents, of society, of our teachers. It's not a very supportive voice. Intuition can also manifest as visual. So if you're walking around with your camera and you notice lights, colors, forms, shapes, textures, patterns, trust that. That's your eye guiding you to what you need to photograph. So one way to see how your intuition communicates with you, when you're in a conversation with someone, are you the type of person who says, I know what you mean? Then you're more feeling-based. Or are you the type of person who says, I see what you're saying? Then you're more visual. Or are you the type of person who says, yeah, I hear you? And you're more auditory. It's kind of fascinating. It's the way our subconscious communicates with us. So again, we have all three. Normally one is stronger than the rest. Some days it might be feeling, some days it might be visual, some days it might be a voice. Oftentimes they can also work in tandem. So for example, you may be walking down the street, you visually see a puddle with a reflection. I love reflections in puddles. You feel a sense of joy, of excitement. That's the photo I want you to get, because your eyes guided you and you felt that confirmation with a feeling. Okay, so it's really tapping in to see how your body is communicating with you. Oftentimes when I'm photographing out on the street, I set no intention. I trust myself. I want my senses to guide me. When I do that, the world opens up because I'm not stuck up here. I'm really approaching it from a heart base. So what is intuitive photography? So this is on page 11 in my book. Intuitive photography is photography based on feeling, sensing, and tuning into yourself. It's a style of photography that allows you to be in the present moment rather than being stuck with the thoughts in your head. It's a meditation process. It's an approach that allows you to be flexible and free, to easily move and photograph without being burdened with heavy equipment or thinking you have to get a technically perfect image. So, intuitive photography is really photographing from our heart, not our head. Oftentimes when I teach my intuitive photography class, the first class I taught was in 2010. And since the very first class, it's really important not to set any expectations. When you have a thought in your head of what you have to capture, it normally it never works out that way. You put yourself under too much stress. You're not really open to receive. I also tell my students there's nothing you can do wrong. You can't make a mistake. It alleviates all sorts of stress to really allow you to tap into the child that's within you. trust what you feel. It's really one of the hardest things that we should learn. And I never like to tell people what they need to do, but when you really kind of tap into how your body's communicating, it really it allows you to go down a path that may be very different than what you have, what you expect or what you want to do. Let go of control, and it's important to become vulnerable. This is also really, really difficult. I think I actually say it in my book, I often say, imagine if you go into the middle of Central Park and you go to the Great Lawn, you stand there and you take off all your clothes and you stand there naked and you say, love me or hate me. You're gonna have some people who love you, some people who hate you, right? You can't please everyone. And it's letting go of that in your head as well. So when you take a photo, ultimately the photo you take should be a gift for yourself and not for anyone else. It should bring you a sense of joy and not worry about that end result. So as you all probably know this as well, you show one photo to 10 people, you're going to get 10 different answers, right? So it's really taking an image that's meaningful to you. It's also important to tap into your senses. The first time I actually recognized this, I was in Central Park, and I had my camera around my neck, and there was a bird singing in the tree, and the bird was singing like it always sings. There was nothing special. However, it sounded like it was singing through a microphone. It was really, really loud. And I look up at the bird, and there was a beautiful image. So I like to always say that the bird was a messenger. It was calling me to it. If you kind of trust your senses too, you may be surprised by what appears to you. So I have a lot of students who are food bloggers. I tell them, taste the food before you photograph it. What is it about the food that you want to highlight? Is it the texture? Is it the smell? Is it the heat? Is it the coolness? So it's really kind of using that. I love abstract photography. I'm like a little kid at Christmas when I see a great abstract shot. Whenever I hear construction sites, I'm running to that site. So it could be hearing, smell. Again, I often tell my students who take my class, if there's a person with an interesting cologne or perfume, follow them. Don't stalk them. Don't be creepy, but follow them, because they may lead you down a street that you would have never gone down, and you may see something that you may not have ever known existed. So if you follow all of these, kind of approaching photography from here, trusting yourself, allowing yourself to be vulnerable, letting go of all that control. If you allow yourself to tap into your senses, what happens is you go from doing photography to experiencing photography. And the biggest difference for me in experiencing photography is it becomes magical. It really is my form of meditation. I forget everything that's going on in my world or going on up here, and I'm in this beautiful creative bubble. It's the same type of zone that athletes get in. If you ever heard them say that I'm in the zone, you just forget all about everything, and you're experiencing it because you're open and you're allowing your senses to help guide you. What I also have come to recognize over the years that also helped me change as a photographer is when I started out, I would go on vacation, I would do street photography, walk around, and I always had the camera in front of my face and I was documenting everything, but I never experienced it for myself. One shift that I made a couple years ago is that I really wanted to start experiencing the moment first for myself before I photograph. So there was one situation where I was asked to photograph there was a sick cat that I needed to take care of, and it was in a house in Massachusetts, and it was New Year's Eve, and I would be alone in the house for New Year's Eve, and for me it was like heaven. So I went on up and I made a kind of like a intention for myself to photograph the sunrise on January 1st, and to kind of set an intention of how I want to slow down in life, and also just with my photography. So I got up before the sunrise and I was standing on the beach, experiencing the moment for myself. I was the only human out there. And then as the sun came up, I was in gratitude. I was really just enjoying the moment. Then I decided to take the photograph. So it was really me experiencing it first and then being able to capture it. Now, some of my private clients who have bought that series of mine, they tell me, Mindy, every time I look at that photo, I feel peace. I don't know what it is about it, but it just makes me feel so relaxed. And so they feel what I felt. So your spirit, your energy actually gets transformed into the image when you allow yourself again to let go. Some tips on how to photograph intuitively. Number one, be in the right mindset. So if you go out and you say, today I have to capture the best image ever, you are going to suffocate. You are going to kind of freeze yourself. You gotta let go. Open up your spirit and try to shut this voice off in your head. Again, that can be really, really suffocating. So when I go out to photograph, if it's street photography, if it's a wedding, if it's a family shoot, whatever it is, I always say to myself, just have fun, do the best you can, and I allow myself to actually be present in that moment then. Set your camera settings. So I try to keep photography as simple as possible. I have an older camera, it's a Canon 5D Mark II, and the lens that I use, my primary lens that I use for everything is a 24x70. So I can only shoot in manual these days. I really don't feel comfortable shooting in aperture priority or shutter priority. So what I do is I set my camera to the settings that I know I like. If I'm outdoors, first thing I do, set my ISO. Second thing I do, I think about my aperture. I love a low f-stop. I love that shallow depth of field. I don't have to think about those two components anymore. So when I see something unfolding, all I have to think about is my shutter speed. So it allows me to be a lot freer and faster when I go out to photograph. I really don't have to get caught up in the technical issues. Tune in, see how your body is communicating with you. Again, I want to reiterate, especially with the feeling, it's very different for each and every one of us. So for some people, especially when you have your camera in your hand, what you may sense is a magnetic pull towards something. So if you're walking down the street and you feel magnetically pulled to a garbage can, let's say, I want you to trust that. Okay, that's the part where the vulnerability comes in, where the trust comes in. Don't stand there and say, really, I'm going to photograph garbage, because that's that negative voice coming in and really starting to kind of infiltrate. So I want you to tune in. If you're magnetically pulled to a garbage can, are you feeling joy? Are you feeling a sense of happiness? Do you feel like a little kid at Christmas? Then take that shot. I don't want you to be a robot. I don't want you to take a photo because you've seen that subject done a gazillion times before and you feel you need to do the same thing. So now it's in the summer and the spring. If, for example, say you're walking in the park and you see a rose and you say, oh, you know, I should photograph the rose because everybody else is doing it. I want to do the same. Don't do it. If you don't feel that sense of joy and excitement, I don't want you to take that photo. But if you see a piece of gum on the floor and you get goosebumps, or you have that magnetic pull, or you just feel like your whole body is giving you a yes, that's the shot I want you to take. So again, it's really kind of tuning in, seeing how your body is communicating with you and trusting it and following through. Don't judge. It's also a really important thing. Don't judge yourself or the subject. We all tend to label things. Garbage can equals dirty, messy, not really something you want to photograph. There is beauty in everything. We just really have to slow down and see it. We may not actually find everything beautiful, but I don't want you to just say, oh, that's dirty, that's not what I normally photograph, and move on. So a short little story. One of my students, he's a retired cop, New York City cop. And he loves photographing orange traffic cones. He's like a little boy at Christmas when he sees a traffic cone. I don't have the same story with traffic cones. I don't feel that excitement or joy, so I don't photograph them. So everyone has their own thing that gets them excited. If it's a bicycle basket, if it's gum, if it's traffic cones, enjoy it, right? There's no right or wrong. All right, So let me show you some of my photos to give you an example. I'll talk a little bit about what I just spoke over. Yeah. So this was taken a couple of years ago. We had a big blizzard here in the city, and I woke up and I had three words in my head. My voice popped up and said, "Dogs, Central Park, snow." That's it. So what did I do? I approached this as a child. I said, okay, let's explore. I want to be curious. I want to just go with whatever I'm feeling. So I put on my snow pants, I got all my gear, I head on out. Now, my head came into the equation and said, oh, there's a dog run. Why don't you just go to the dog run? It's closer, you don't have to walk into the park. I walked to the dog run, nothing was there. So I go into Central Park and I head into the Great Lawn. And I see these dogs chasing one another. The owners are standing off to the side. I felt a sense of excitement. I had no idea what was going to happen. I sit in the middle of the field, Indian style, cross legs. I have my camera in my hand. I set the settings to what I wanted it to be, and I just sat there. Within literally a minute, the dogs turned around, came straight at me, charged. 10 seconds, not even 10 seconds, 5 seconds after the shot, we were all covered in snow. So I trusted it. I followed through. I had no idea what I was going to get. I set no expectations on myself, and I was able to get a shot like this. This photo was also one of those moments, and this time my intuition spoke to me via my voice. So I was meeting a friend for dinner in, where were we? In Union Square. I got there a little early, and I'm walking down the street, and my voice pops up, and all it said was, turn left at the corner. That's all. Now, my conditioned voice, which is the voice of my teachers, my parents, society, all that, popped up and said, what are you doing? You're going to be late. Go to the restaurant. Your friend's going to be upset. Just Now, my friend knows I'm a photographer. If I explained to him that I needed to take a photo, he would understand. Otherwise, he wouldn't be my friend. So whenever I hear that critical voice, I say thanks, but no thanks. I really try not to listen to it. I turned left at the corner. There was steam coming up out of a subway grate. Cars were coming towards me, so the headlight of the car was illuminating the steam. A man is walking down the street, and that's his shadow superimposed on the steam from the headlights. I had to be fast. So when I saw this, I just got down on the floor, prayed to the photo gods so nobody would walk in front of my lens, and I was able to capture the shot. I'm going to actually answer questions later on. So again, had I not trusted that voice, had I not listened to it, I would have never been able to capture this. I don't have the creative insight to have formulated something like this. I could try to do it again. It wouldn't be the same. I could try it in the studio. It wouldn't be the same. It's authentic. It's raw. It's life. And that's what my photography and what my meditation and creative process is all about. So I recently went to Cuba, and for me, Cuba was absolutely amazing. I'm sure a lot of you who ever have been would say the same. It can be a little overwhelming visually. There's a lot of colors, the people are amazing, and before I travel on any trip, I never do any sort of research because I don't want any sort of images to predetermine what it is that I want to photograph. I really want to go with an open mind and an open slate. So, of course, I knew there would be all these amazing, fantastic cars, but when I got there, I didn't want to take the typical postcard shots. I didn't want to be a robot. I didn't want to be like everyone else. So I had some time to wander around on my own, and what I first heard, I heard them speak. Now, I don't speak Spanish, so I have no idea what they were saying, but then I saw that they were playing dominoes. So I stood there for a couple of minutes watching them just to kind of let them know that I was there. And then I waited for kind of my feelings, or however my intuition were to kind of show itself. I was waiting for that moment. And at one point, I kind of, what happens is, some of you may have experienced this, you sort of kind of can predict what may happen in the next few seconds. And so I saw that the man here on the bottom was about to take a piece. And so I really wanted to really focus in on that. I didn't want to showcase their faces, even though they were beautiful faces. I felt that that would be a little too distracting to the actual moment of the story. Here was also taken in Cuba. This was actually pretty funny. So a bunch of us had just eaten a big lunch, and everybody was feeling very tired, and they were going to go back to the hotel and nap. And for whatever reason, I felt invigorated. I said, no, I'm going to go out and take a walk. So I was literally walking for at least 2-3 hours, and I had this urge that I needed to walk to the Malacan. So I'm walking south, and all of a sudden I see this couple. Now, I normally don't want to interfere in any sort of moment, but these high school kids, they were really going at it. And so I'm standing back there, and she sees me, and she looks at me, and she gives me this big smile, and then she plants a kiss on him. And so I knew I got her permission, and so I took the shot. And you can see she's kind of has her foot on his foot, she's leaning up, she's really, and he's very cool and collected. But what I also appreciated in this moment, where there was no other distraction really, I was really able to focus on this particular couple. So a couple months ago, not even, it was in April, I went to Northern Ireland. I wanted to explore the landscape there, and this was taken in the Giant's Causeway, all the way up north. And I was with a group of people again, and one of them said, "Oh, I want the people to go away. I don't like having people in my photograph." I do. I like having a human aspect in it. And so I saw in my abstract eye the pattern, and then this man was this tiny little speck, and it was really windy, and his jacket was billowing, and I just felt that I needed to capture that shot. Again, still in Ireland. But what was great here is that these sheep were making a lot of noise, and of course the mother was very protective of the babies. But what I really loved was the fluffiness of the clouds behind the sheep to kind of really illustrate the effect of the wool. So let me talk a little bit about the book. So the book covers what intuition is, how it communicates with us. I describe steps on how to photograph intuitively. There are exercises to help you build your intuitive muscle. There are tips I give in there. I also have our 13 commandments of intuitive photography, quotes from our students, and also photo examples. So I have 29 of my students. They have their photos in this book with blurbs as to what intuitive photography or what intuitively allowed them to photograph the subject. What spoke to them? Was it a physical reaction? Was it their voice? Was it visual? To really showcase that this is something that can be done, and you can really create beautiful creative images from that. There are also tools and tactics and handy reminders throughout the book to help you stay focused. So like David said, sometimes there's just one or two little things that you say, I always did that, but I never knew that was my intuition. Or let me just do this exercise. Let me tap into the child within me and really explore an area. Now, I also have it written so that if you don't have an expensive camera, you could use a smartphone, you can use your digital SLR. It really doesn't matter what kind of equipment you have. Benefits that you may get from reading the book. You can make more meaningful photographs that express who you are, rather than you, again, trying to photograph what you think you need to take. It helps you find subjects that get you excited. All right, so it's you tapping in, how's your intuition communicating with you, and if you feel that sense of joy, your image will showcase that, but you also have a memory associated with that. It helps you express your own eye and shows your uniqueness, so you're not going to be a robot taking the same photos as everybody else. It can also be used as a form of meditation. Like I said, for me, it's my form of meditation. Whenever I really get stressed, I go out with my camera and I forget everything else that's going on in my life. And it actually, back in January, I was on Good Morning America. I did a meditation segment with Deepak Chopra, and he was talking about meditation. And what I got out of it was really that you can meditate whenever. It doesn't have to be sitting in a lotus position chanting Om. You can use any tool to kind of just calm the thoughts in your mind. And for me, photography does that. This can be applied not only to photography, but to life in general. So once you have an understanding of how your intuition taps into you, you can use that with your career or with your personal life or with your photography. All right, I just want to read a quick little portion in chapter 1. So what I'm about to read is written right after I'm in Switzerland, and after I did my MBA. It took me almost a year to find a job. It's really hard out there to get a work permit, to get a visa. And I got my job, and I was super excited, and then the next step happened. So then it started. Uncertainty crept in. I started feeling uncomfortable. My body was giving me signals that were hard to ignore. Upset stomach, waking up stressed in the middle of the night, lack of joy, eating more comfort foods, going shopping, not wanting to get up in the morning. My body was giving me the signals, but my brain was saying, "What's wrong with you? Why can't you just stick to one thing and stay with it? You worked so hard to get a permit and a job, and now you want to leave?" I had reached my goal. I was on top of that mountain. Now what? I felt I had no purpose. I achieved what I wanted, and now I was unchallenged. Of course I had to stay, said my head. My heart, though, oh, my poor heart. I knew I had to follow it. I felt there had to be more to life, even though I felt I had a purposeful job. I was put here on planet Earth for a reason, and I had to move on to find out what it was. It was time to ask the big questions again. What was it that was making me feel this way? And what is it that would make me feel happy? So I hope with you being able to tap into yourself, you can make any sort of decisions in your personal life, but also with your photography. Yeah, so the question was in the photo of the shadow, oops, that was it. If it was staged, or not staged, but if I had planned it or if it was in the moment. And yeah, it was purely in the moment. What I do oftentimes, if I have an element of time, I give myself an exercise that I call follow the path of least resistance. So like in this circumstance, I had extra time before I was meeting my friend. And in this particular moment, my voice came up. But if I'm not feeling anything, I'll stop on a corner and I'll ask myself, left, right, straight, what side feels better? Which way do I want to go? So again, I'm really, really open to it, right? And it takes practice. It's really hard to trust yourself and to find out how it's communicating with you. Now, intuition, just to go over this a little bit again, it's like a muscle. You have to work on it because we're not taught this. We really are not familiar with how it works. Some fun things that you can do to build your intuitive muscle. Now, this is something I started when I worked in IT. Back in those days, I had a pretty big beeper and cell phone. What do kids normally do when they're bored? They make up games. They want to do something fun, right? So what would happen when I would get a call or a message on my phone, I would try to sense who's calling or texting. When I teach in the summer camp to children and to teens, and I often tell them, I kind of predict who's going to call, and oftentimes I'm right. And I ask the kids, do you ever do that? And they say, yeah. And so I ask, how often are you correct? Pretty often they tune in, they get it right. It's not that it's psychic. You're just taking, you're shutting this off and really being present. So when that phone beeps, when that text message comes in, stop just for 1 or 2 seconds, and if you're more feeling based, try to feel who's calling or texting you. If you're more visual, maybe you'll see the person's face, or if it's more auditory, maybe you'll hear the person's voice. Right? So you have to kind of work it up. And so in this particular moment, when I heard that voice for this shot, I knew it was my intuitive voice. It wasn't that critical voice. Yes, yes. So of course we all have different levels of experience in how we're photographing and all. And so the question was primarily, it feels a little staged photographing in manual mode if somebody wanted to shoot with a smartphone or a little point and shoots. It would be more intuitive. Honestly, like you said, it doesn't matter what equipment you have. You can have a $20 cell phone. The important thing is that you're actually experiencing your environment as you're out and photographing. For me, I like to be able to know what my camera setting is set to, so I don't have any surprises. I know what my eye likes. I know what my style is. Somebody said to me years ago, every photo you take is a biography of who you are. And I really like that. And so I try to stay consistent with my camera settings. And now, of course, I may change it. So with the shot with the sheep, with this one, I increased my F number a little bit because I wanted the definition of the clouds in the background. And the same thing with the dogs running in snow. There, for me, the important story that I wanted to tell in this shot was I wanted the New York City skyline in the background because I wanted anyone who saw this photo know that it was taken in New York City. So in these moments, if I have the element of time, I will think technically. But otherwise, I want to keep it as simple as possible so I don't have to think about the technical aspects. So if you're more comfortable shooting in program, that's what I want you to do. Whatever mode you're most comfortable with is the most important thing, because I don't want you turning this on if you don't want to. When I was a student really trying to figure all this out, I knew I wasn't the only one looking to be creative. I knew others would be too, and I just kind of let myself go and say, all right, let me try to teach what I taught myself, what was natural to me. And it's really kind of a joy and a gift to be able to see that we've done so well with this, that people are searching for something that's a little different, and that it's okay to be unique and be yourself and to be vulnerable in your art. Again, it's the only true way of expressing your voice. So thank you all.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.